today's session, so we have our first session is by Mr. Nagaraj. So as I mentioned earlier, he is one of the he having almost more than 13 years experience on data platform, and sorry, and he was Microsoft MVP for 2 years, and apart from that, he also spoke in a lot of conferences in AI conference from Microsoft, and now previously he was working in New Zealand. I think he recently shifted from New Zealand to Singapore again back, and so he is going to speak on Azure Synapse Analytics, which is more on basic and introductory sessions, and there will be more deep. There will be upcoming sessions in upcoming days, in maybe 2 weeks after, from same the series. So now next to Nagaraj, I think. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Asif, for the excellent introduction. So, good morning, everyone. It looks like we have about 13 people in the room or in the virtual room, as we say. So as Asif introduced, I'm Nagaraj. Currently, I'm working as a customer engineer for Microsoft, basically something like a consultant. My portfolio is data and AI. So one of my responsibilities is to work with various customers across the globe on the various data and AI problems that they have. I've run workshops or sometimes offer extended technical help for a few months and so on. So so as uh, as Asif mentioned, so this group, the SQL Server user group, myself and few couple of other friends, we started it in 2015. And then we had it for a while, and I slowly moved into Microsoft itself after a while, and then I handed it over to these wonderful gentlemen over here, PO, Asif, and Aro. They are doing an excellent job. I'm seeing the frequency at which they are doing the sessions and conducting the big events. Very happy to see that the Singapore user group is maintained in a very good, is it's maintained in a very good shape. So thanks again for the excellent team, PO and Aro and Asif. And I request the community to extend the same level of support that you have been doing all this while. Okay, so so let's get to the topic of for today. So first thing that before I actually get started with the session, let me share my screen over here, and all of you can see my screen. So first thing which I would like to do while we talk is to, just because this one being a virtual session, so I would like to know, I would like to just understand the audience a bit, meaning how familiar you are, the team is with Synapse, so that I can I can structure my sessions. I plan to do a series of sessions, so I can structure my sessions depending upon the audience and exposure level. So I have posted a link in the meeting chat. If possible, if you can just click on it and respond to that question. Otherwise, you can also just scan this QR code and just give me a reply to on how familiar you are with Synapse. So if you could do that in the next possibly 2 minutes, maybe. Yeah. So that would be helpful. Yeah, probably by 7-9. Yeah. So while you do this, so I'll just continue talking. So this particular session about Azure Synapse Analytics, the first session. So it's an introductory session to help you get started with Synapse, what it can do, uh, like any new product of Microsoft, what it's trying to solve, all, and how organizations can leverage, and how, and also what are the various capabilities of that particular product. So today we'll start something light, and then hopefully in the upcoming sections we can go lot more deeper as well. So let me just see what the response looks like. Oh, 9 responses. That's pretty good. Okay, 4 of them have played with it. That's very good. Heard of it, haven't tried. So five of them haven't tried, 4 of them have played with it. Excellent, which is good. So I will take it like 50% of the audience is familiar, which is excellent. Okay, so let's, if you want to still respond to the quiz, just go to the chat window. Yep. So let me just continue. So what is Azure Synapse Analytics? So Azure Synapse Analytics, so it was introduced, probably the version 1 was introduced at least a year and a half ago, or a little longer than that. And version 2, or generation 2 as they call it, was became GA 2 to 3 months ago. So what it aims to do is it aims to give analytics service irrespective of what size of your data, what what type of your data, what velocity it is coming, mm, and it is capable of giving enterprise standard performance, and gives you the ability to deliver insights out of it. So this introduction, whatever I said, uh, sounds very familiar. Probably we keep saying this for many services of Microsoft Azure, right? So so but what is special about Azure Synapse Analytics? So simply, let's get into some more details. Okay, so so Synapse SQL. So within Synapse itself, you would probably split it up into these 4 key pillars. You have Synapse SQL, which, if you are already familiar with Azure Data Warehouse, it is pretty similar to that. Meaning you have Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Just for starters, Azure SQL Data Warehouse was that was that big data and data warehousing solution, which allows you to create distributed databases, meaning which can scale very effectively as well. So big data solution for relational data. So we already had Azure SQL Data Warehouse. That component still stays within Synapse. In addition to that, we are also bringing in Apache Spark capabilities. You also are bringing in big data capabilities that can be used using in Spark framework. You can do big data with things like Scala, Python, and so on. And so in-memory big data capabilities are brought in. Synapse also brings together Azure Data Factory's capabilities, like you can build pipelines within Synapse itself, and you can stitch the various sources of data, make transformations, and finally push it to the reporting layer as well. So all this can be used via Synapse Studio, or rather, that is the client interface by which you can manage all these together. So the fundamental difference between Gen 1 and Gen 2 is, from Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Synapse has evolved into a fully fledged big data solution capable of allowing you to 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 do big data from from Spark and also from T-SQL layers. This particular session is less about slides and more about doing things. So I'll be I'll be I'll be going more into Azure Portal to to show most of the stuff. Okay, so one of the biggest challenges with existing solutions, meaning you have, for example, you have a typical. Let's just look at the slide, and even though it's coming at the last. Let me just go to this slide now. Moment. Okay, so in a big data solution revolving around Azure, more often than not, you will see this kind of architecture. Mostly similarly, 60 to 70% of the time. You'll have a few other services, by and large, you will see this. So you'll have Azure Data Factory to be used to pull the data, load it into data storage, something like Azure Data Lake. And then you have Databricks, which is the best possible Spark engine available, which does all the massaging and it lets you to explore the data, run your ML, machine learning, and find the insights and do all that. And then you will, once you are absolutely convinced that okay, this is the one that I want to send to reporting, so then you'll push it into data warehouse, which acts as the serving layer, which is optimized for running heavy analytic queries. So the result is stored in data warehouse, and then the result is displayed in Power BI. So this is the typical flow that you have. Sometimes you may have Azure Analysis Service in a few scenarios somewhere over here, or if you have sometimes you can have Cosmos DB if your workload is on things like if it's more unstructured data that you want to maintain and you don't want to have tabular format at all, then you may wish to go for something like Cosmos DB and so on. So by and large, you'll have this sort of flow. But the biggest challenge, how I wish this session was. Let me just pause for a moment. What do you think is the biggest challenge in this particular framework? You just open up your mic and just say, I'm 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 all good. Anyone? What? Okay, let me keep it to the screen so that one moment. It's all right. You can just say, what do you think is a challenge? Some of you have played with these stuff. So feel free to, in your opinion, what was most challenging in doing these kind of things?
For me, basically, when I tried this, this was major challenge. I feel was data means like means like data
Okay.
types transformation,
Okay.
and yeah. So
Okay.
that was
Okay. Data types is one. Sujay has also said pulling it from different sources. Yes, Asif has said data types. Yes, I agree. So one of the that is one challenge. And in addition to that, one challenge which we would have all faced is tying all these together, meaning establishing the right connectivity across all these and managing them and troubleshooting and managing everything together is a significant challenge. It is a challenge even even with even currently with customers using previous version of Synapse. Okay, so when making all these into one single bucket and maintaining them together, even though it is much better than several other platforms. Okay, uh, other cloud platforms. Still, I would probably say one of the challenges stitching all these things together is a significant challenge. What Synapse actually does is now Data Factory is inside over here. It works very closely with Data Lake. Like, like you need not have a separate Databricks. You have pretty much almost the same engine inside Synapse itself. And then we have our good old data warehouse inside it. So all these things are combined right inside this one single service, which makes it a lot more easier to maintain and to work out something. To gain insights out of that, but the data to combine across multiple sources and then to manage it makes it much easier. So today my objective is is to show you what I want to do now is I want to take a simple CSV. and I want to take it all the way to Power BI in this next 30 odd minutes or so, and also explain the stuff I want to cover. So that's the intention. If I can do that, then it is indeed pretty easy, right? In a session in 30 minutes, if I can take it through all these layers and finally see it in Power BI, then it is cool, isn't it? Okay, let's see if that can be done. So first thing that, as I said, first I want to talk about Synapse Sql. So Synapse Sql, before I get into it, what is this Synapse Sql pool? So all of you, I think, are familiar with SQL Server, right? So you have SQL Server, which is capable of storing relational data, and you can put massive amount of data into it. It is able to handle. Then what is Synapse SQL pool different from it, or what is Azure SQL Data Warehouse different from it? So one of the fundamental difference between a traditional SQL and this data warehouse is it supports MPP architecture. These are distributed databases where the data is actually distributed across multiple machines, and you have multiple CPUs running in parallel to execute one single query. When I submit a query, it is capable of splitting it into across multiple nodes. It You have multiple mini SQL servers running in different machines. It takes the workload, splits, runs, pushes the data back, and then it is presented. So, and the data is all optimized for analytic workload. How do I say it's optimized? When I'm running it in data warehouse, the data is by default using column store, or or it is by default running on columnar storage. In traditional SQL, by default, you have row store based, which is a lot more useful for singleton queries or queries that affect few bunch of rows. Whereas when you talk about analytic workloads, one of the key things that you need is maintaining the data by columnar or storage. So that is there in Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and that is there in Synapse SQL Pools as well. Okay, so within Synapse SQL Pools, you have two categories. One is serverless, other is dedicated, meaning what these two are. So dedicated means is our good old Azure SQL data warehouse, where you create the services. Yes, you spin off some amount of nodes, and then and then the service is running. You submit the queries, and then the workload is distributed. Results are coming. So you can pause the service when you don't need it. You are billed only when the service is actually running. So you can pause it when you actually don't use it. You have the serverless mode where there is no service that's running. So when the query is submitted, it automatically goes and spins off whatever number of nodes you need. You can submit a SQL query. It can automatically go and spin off whatever amount of nodes it needs, and then it can run. And once the query is executed, and you only pay for the amount of resources that the query actually consumed. So that is serverless, that is available in Gen 2. Earlier Gen 1 and was just Azure SQL Data Warehouse, where you had only the dedicated component. Now with generation 2, you have the serverless and the dedicated. So this is the architecture. So the data can in both dedicated and serverless, the workload is distributed across multiple nodes, and then it talks to the Azure storage and pulls the data. Let's actually go and see how these things look like. Any questions or anything that the team wants to say? Meanwhile, yeah, following me so far?
Yeah. Hi everyone. If you have any questions, so you can unmute or can ask, or maybe you can put in the chat box.
Yeah, yeah. I would encourage you to unmute and ask because I may not be seeing the chat box. Don't worry about interrupting me. So just unmute and just ask. Happy to take your questions. Okay, let's go into Azure Portal and do some work. Okay, so so to get started, so let me let me just create a resource. Azure Synapse Analytics. So typical stuff. Give your user, uh, give a particular area that you want to resource group RG, and then give a unique name. Probably apps WS1 maybe, and then I need a for this thing to work, for Azure Synapse workspaces to work. First, you create something called workspace, which is like a container which contains the SQL pool, the pipelines, the notebooks, the Apache Spark pool. All these go into the workspace. So first we create the workspace. So and then you have, okay, so for this I would need to create uh, yeah, Azure Data Lake account as well. So have a Data Lake account. If you don't have one, you can just give a name, create new. It's a Data Lake Gen 2 account that gets created, and it will ask you to give a file system name inside the account name. So which is like just like a directory in your typical Windows machine. So and then it also asks for the SQL user account and password. So these two are also needed. So the account that you use for the SQL pool. So the SA account and the password. So once you give these, the service typically gets ready in about 2 minutes. But in the interest of time, I have a workspace that has already been created. So once I create it, I would get something like this Synapse workspace over here. The storage account that I created came in over here. These two comes once we spin off some sort of Apache Spark pools and the SQL pools once we spin it off. So once I create them, so I have I have what you typically see is a built-in serverless SQL pool. You won't have a dedicated pool by default. I have already created it. Again, in the interest of time, I don't want to spend 2 minutes staring at the screen. So it doesn't take that long, to be honest, but I just created it so that we can cover the key items. Okay, so I have I have the built-in pool, which appears by default. You don't get the SQL pool and the Spark pools till you create them. So once you do that, so typically, so initially till you start something, by default you're not charged anything. So to create it. So after I do that, next thing you would want to do is to create a dedicated SQL pool, which is the typical data warehouse that you want to have. Let's cover off the dedicated SQL pool and and the server and the serverless aspect of the SQL pool first up. So if I go and click on the dedicated SQL pool, if you are familiar with Azure SQL Data Warehouse, then you would know this. So it is like creating a Azure SQL Data Warehouse database. So over here, or rather Azure SQL Data Warehouse instance. So over here, I specify the SQL pool name, meaning I can give it. some name, keep it to minimum. You can go up. So depending upon what level you pick, that many number of distributed nodes you get, up to 400 or DW 500 you get. You don't up to DW 400. It is only one node. After DW 500 and so on, you get multiple nodes and so on. So for DW 6000, it goes up to 12 nodes if I'm not wrong. 6000 is 5000 is 10 nodes. Yeah, 6000 is 12 nodes. So for every 500, you typically have a additional node.
Hi,
Okay.
Nagaraj. I
Yeah,
have
go
one
ahead.
here.
Yes, please.
On in one node, basically how many? Because as I understood my when I was going through this Synapse analytics before, so whenever we compute the transactions on the data
Mhm.
warehouse, so it distribute the queries into 60 multiple 60 queries. It is for the one node, or it means like it's for for different
Okay.
nodes.
Okay, let me correct this over here. So it doesn't distribute the query itself into 60 queries. Okay.
Okay.
So when you create a table, so
Yeah.
i- inside each node you have 60 distributions, meaning by default inside each node it will
Okay.
distribute the table into 60. It's like simple SQL partition where inside it each node you have multiple distributions. Those 60 that you are calling is distributions, number of distributions. The nodes are on top of it. You have actual servers running. So if I, for example, in this particular case where I'm having 100, what I would have is only one node. But inside that single node, for each table I create, it will be distributed into 60 different distributions. Yeah.
Oh,
So by default, it will partition the data and split it into like small 60 tables inside each node. And the query will be split when you have multiple. If I have over if I have two CPU nodes or three CPU nodes and so on, yeah, or three compute nodes and so on.
oh, okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. Okay, thanks, Asif, for making me feel I'm speaking to a real audience. So sometimes the challenge with these remote sessions, which I have been delivering almost every day since last 1 year, so is sometimes it feels as if you are on a monologue. Okay,
True. True. Yeah.
so it's like talking to the mirror. There
Yeah.
have been cases where I have had audience where there is absolutely no response after talking for almost 1 day, not 1 hour, 9 to 5, and then I asked them, okay, just shy, that's all right, that's fine, absolutely fine. So and then I ask, all right, there will be two or three people. These are specific to few customers, or there will be two or three people in the call. So just ask their name and do you have any questions? This was something you mentioned earlier that's interesting for you, and then there will be no answer, and then the person would have already gone somewhere.
Yeah.
So it has happened more than once, and I'm glad this one is not in that sense. Thanks a lot. Okay, okay, moving on. So so create the dedicated SQL pool, give the skew, and yeah, and once you do this, this also takes typically about 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes max. So the SQL pool comes up in about 3 minutes, so which is good. So once I have that, I have the SQL pool, I have a serverless pool, which is built in. I did not do anything special for it. You can create any number of SQL pool depending upon how strong your credit card is. So so dedicated pools, as you saw, so they come for each capacity. The dollar value actually goes up, so use it wisely. Okay, so
Hi,
one
Nagaraj.
important thing. Yeah, go ahead.
There is one question here. If you created a serverless, can you convert in later dedicated, or how about other way around? You know, from Christine.
Okay. One point is you have only one serverless pool that is built in. There is nothing called converting it or doing anything to it. Okay, the dedicated pool is like a server that is actually running, and so there is no chance of converting from A to B. And if you understand, if I explain this completely, then you will understand that you not need such a case where you actually need to convert from A to B or serverless to dedicated and dedicated to serverless. Thanks, Christian, for that. Just hold that question for a while. Let's get through the session. Probably after that, if you still have that question, shoot it again in and I will try to explain it more. Okay, let's. Okay, we have this now. One thing I have is I have uploaded one little file called weather.csv inside this container which I have attached with Synapse. So this particular, so I have uploaded this particular file which I'll be using during the demos. It's a little simple file. You again, in the interest of time, I wanted the results to come a little faster. So okay, so now what I'm going to do now is I am going to into use serverless to query uh, do whatever I can. Yeah. Okay. Or yeah. Or let me do serverless first. Let me show how it works with in dedicated, and then probably I'll switch to serverless. So first, let me get started with dedicated pool over here. So first thing, how to access a Synapse workspace? You can either click on this Open Synapse Studio or click on this workspace URL. Let's do this. So it opens up this interface. And then once I click over here, I see, okay, I have these 4 tabs, just the home, which is more like an intro of sorts. And then I have data, I have develop where you can typically have your notebooks and stuff. Integrate is the pipeline piece, monitor, and some manages to plugging into a few other services. So let's start from data. Over here, I have a SQL pool because I have a SQL instance created over there, and then I have I have yeah I have the default Spark pool because I created a Spark pool already. So let's look at this little later. This is, as I said, is our good old Azure SQL data warehouse. So if I want to want to run queries, or I can straight away do it as usual from over here. So it will tell me which pool do I want to. I am yet to start my Synapse dedicated pool. Let me start it. So what are the kind of things typically you do? So what you may want to do is you think of the architecture that we spoke earlier. So let's say you have some data in blob storage. So Synapse can be used to ingest the data onto Azure SQL data warehouse, and you can try to gain insights out of it. So I have this particular zip file. Well, it is not a storage account inside my subscription. It is a storage account stored elsewhere. I can I can query this data stored in a blob storage as long as I have permissions against this particular storage account. Say that I want to unzip on the fly, give whatever parameters that are needed and give the delimiters and so on, and then the data will be ingested inside it, Synapse. So this particular tab, and it is pretty fast in terms of doing the ingestions. So this particular zip file is about 150 MB, so flowing through the internet, and it will be uncompressed on the fly, and it will be loaded into Synapse. So you have the option of doing this as I have shown, ingesting it directly. You can create something called external tables, by which you can create a link to that particular file, and you can run queries on top of it. Okay, so you have both the options. If the data is already ready, then you may want to ingest it into Synapse for so that it can be consumed at other layers. If the data is still under prep, then you may want to create something like a external table, run some queries on top of it, and then ingest it into a table in Synapse. Over here. So it took about a minute for it to do the job. I think it would have ingested compressed is 150 MB, probably the actual data size would be much bigger than that. How many rows did it do? We were to check. So about nearly 3 million in less than a minute. And I'm doing this with a very basic skew. Higher the skew, faster the performance. Okay, we have quite a few things to cover. Let me just quickly move on. And now this is the typical Synapse pools. So let's say I want to use something like a serverless pool. What is the use of serverless pool? Serverless pool lets you to explore the data on the fly. It you can, let's say you have the data stored in Azure Blob Storage, or like I have shown. Using serverless pool, you can directly interact with the data without actually spinning any sort of resources. So let's right away look into it without wasting much of time. Okay, so over here, when I'm connecting to built-in, does anyone want to say anything? Okay, yeah, thanks. So when I'm connecting to the built-in pool over here, then I'm connected to serverless, meaning I haven't created any sort of resource. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to directly run this particular query. So this is talking again to a completely, it is talking to another storage account stored elsewhere. As I said, you can also run any blob storage account that is there in your subscription or something else elsewhere as well. So using serverless, I can do the same thing, meaning I can, but as I said, because it's serverless, I'm not having any storage on my own over here. So I'm talking to some other storage account. So you can do read-only queries against any blob storage or anything, and you can get the data. You can define external table, but you cannot ingest the data onto any other place. So I have, so on the fly, have it would have read the data. If I go to monitor, and if I see blah 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 blah, hang on. If I go over here, it tells me how much amount of data it processed just now. So why this is important? In serverless, what you are built for is the amount of data that it is actually processing. Meaning, for example, if the charges, if I process 1 terabyte of data, the charge is $5. If I don't run any queries, no charges. So that's the way it works. The storage, of course, you pay separately for wherever the blob storage or wherever it is there. So, but for the compute, it purely depends on how much of data that is being processed. So the query I ran, it consumed about 350 meg, and and yeah, that's it. So the charge for that would be fairly minimal, and so on. So serverless, as the name indicates, it you you can run read-only workloads against the area various data that's stored in data lake, or any other blob store against a data lake gen 2 account, and so on. Now let's also do something more. Let's now quickly look at what Spark pools are. So for folks who are familiar with Apache Spark, so you can sorry, for people who are familiar with Azure Databricks, so Spark pool Spark pools are in some sense similar to it, meaning you can create it Azure Apache Spark pool to do to run in in Spark clusters, which distribute the workload across different nodes, and which is optimized for doing analytics in memory, and it is a super powerful big data engine. Okay, so you can run Scala, Python, and all those, whatever, all Java, and all these typical languages that you would use to handle big data workloads. So if I go to Apache Spark, if I'm it as usual ask for a name, and then you can pick the kind of machines that you need. So you want a 4-core machine or 8-core machine or 16-core machine. In you want auto scaling enabled, meaning number of nodes are decided on the fly. Again, Spark pool is in some sense like serverless. Number of, you don't you pay only when you use it. You don't pay all the time. When your queries are running, depending upon how heavy the query is, you need to pay. So over here, you can say minimum to maximum number of nodes, just like you would do in Databricks. And then you can also say auto pause. If there are no queries that are running, then it can be in for 15 minutes, nothing is running, it can automatically shut down. So in that way, you don't pay all the time, right? So 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 you pay only when it is active longer than 15 minutes, or you can reduce the time if you want to aggressively cut down your cost. So it can automatically scale depending upon how much of workload that you're using, and it can also when it doesn't run, and still there may be charge for the storage and a few other things. So completely pausing reduces the cost a lot more effectively. So very little administrative work that needs to be done. So it is fairly simple and straightforward to create. Again, this also takes roughly about 2 to 3 minutes to spin off your Apache Spark pool. You can create a number of Spark pools inside one Synapse workspace, and you can give individual users different levels of permissions, and you can actually ensure you can give permissions against one pool, not give permissions against other, so that you can manage the compute and the cost a lot more effectively. Talking about cost management, and with serverless pools as well, you can actually set you can uh, you can set a particular limit to amount of workload a person can actually run For example, if I go over here, I go to manage pools, and then I see the built-in. So I can actually set, I click on this button, I can actually set daily only X amount of GB of queries can be run. So that weekly you can set this limit and so on. So you can do this to ensure you have a cap on the total cost that you are hitting. Okay, now let's look at Spark pools. Okay, so when I come over here, let's go to this place. I have the default Spark. So I go to data. I can, if I say, if I click on browse gallery, and there are lots and lots of data that you can play with. You can click any of them. For example, let's say if I pick this New York safety data or something. So add the data set. When you say add the data set, it comes in over here, and then it appears over here as sample data set. So if you notice over here inside data, I have I I have the sample data sets which are external, which I have just linked them, and I have the one that I have in my own machine as well. So what I can simply say to use Spark pools is I can just do this, go over here and say that at say new notebook, load this particular blob storage uh, onto a data frame. So once I do that, it automatically picks up a Spark. So I pick up the Spark pool I want to run this against, and then I can I can I can simply pick up which is my favorite language. I have I have the options of Python, Spark, .NET, and Spark SQL. So I can use that to start exploring my data. Like, instead of using this notebook, let me use the one that I already prepared. So so I mentioned that I have a blob storage is over here. So let me run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the data from that particular storage account. So it takes a while for it to start, not the Spark pool to start, for the processes to first time kick in. So it takes about 2 minutes. That's something I cannot work around. So let it start. And then once it starts, I'll be able to use PySpark or whatever my language Scala at each cell. These are notebooks pretty similar to what you see with uh, in Databricks. So you'll be able to use them and you will be able to play with your data. So once it once it comes up, once I load the data onto the data frame, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a database inside Spark. You can create databases inside Spark as well. There and you can create tables inside them. They are called delta tables. These tables are like your SQL Server tables or like your data warehouse tables, but you have it it behind the scene. It is stored as SparkQ files. SparkQ files are simple text files, but pretty much optimized for you to directly interact with it. You can do things like infer schema, meaning you can infer the schema on the fly, load it onto a table, and then work with it fairly seamlessly. Let it come up, starting the Spark session. So once it comes up, the data is fairly small. Only thing is it takes a while for it to start the session. So what we saw is we saw a bit of serverless, we saw dedicated pools. Now we are looking to the Spark pools. So this particular notebook, what it's going to do is it's going to talk to the CSV. I have the weather.csv, whatever, and then we are going to store the data inside. Yeah, the session is ready. Good. We are going to store the data inside Spark DB. So we'll write it into, we are going to store the data inside Spark DB, and then we'll filter something, do something to that table, and then we'll ingest it into our data pool. So that's what we want to do. So once this is done, what we will do is we will schedule it in 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 a data factory pipeline, and then we will we will try to see the results in Power BI. So in the next 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. Uh, I, so now I'm able to read the data from my CSV. You would see I didn't specify how many cores. When we created the Spark pool, it was 3 to 10 cores. So it took 2 nodes. So sorry, we had 3 to 10 nodes, min to max. So it took only 2 nodes because the minimum is 2 nodes. So the file is fairly small. So it took just 2 nodes. And then max is, and that's the reason you have 8 cores, because a single node had about 4 cores over here. So let's create a table and let's save this data frame. This entire file was loaded into your data frame. And then let's save it into a Spark table. They typically call this delta tables. Yeah. So let's save it over here. Should be fairly fast. Okay, done. Almost. Okay, it's done. You can, one of the coolest things is you can visualize the data on the fly as well. So I can just say chart, and I get these cool visualizations over here. I can, for example, it talks about weather data. So let's say I want to see like rainfall and, let's say the temperature, max temperature. So, and let's say I want to see that using a line chart aggregation. Let's say by average maybe. I, I said these two as key. Sorry, I think the key is not so important over here, whereas the values are a lot more important. Okay. Yeah, yeah, fairly easy to look at the trend. Does that have a correlation? Yeah, looks like, obviously, because rain, when you have rain, you expect the temperature to go down. They do go have a fairly similar progression. So you can fairly easily visualize the data using notebooks. I can save it over here. Uh, if I start saving it over here, then I get to see it inside the data as well. So if I go over here, if I refresh, then I just need to refresh it on right on top. Heck, I think I made a little. Okay, so I'll show the tables shortly. I don't want to lose my session. Hopefully I didn't. And then I have, let me show the Spark tables, or I can open up here. Yeah, I can open up a new link. Team, if would you mind giving me 10 more minutes, sure, possibly. 10. I hope to wrap it up by 8:10.
Uh,
Is that a problem?
sure, no problem. I think let me check.
Okay. So we see that data. Let's say I want to do some more work with it. I want to filter it and save the table inside my Spark database. I can always do that too. Okay. So finally, so yeah, the data is there. Just to confirm that the data was there. Can Yeah, I can see the data. I just filtered by humidity at 3 p.m. more than 40 and then saved it. So let's say I find out that the data that's more than and 40 for humidity is a lot more important. I extract the data and I want to save it inside my Azure SQL data pool, which is the data warehouse. Let's say I want to do that. So I can fairly easily do it by Spark using Synapse Sql, this particular function, load it into a data frame and then write it onto onto the data warehouse. So this will create a table inside my data warehouse. Okay. So I have all these things done over here right now. So once I do this, so I will get all my, let it do. While it does, let's go and look at how these things actually look out here. So I see the new database that I just now created over here. I see the tables I created from the notebook. So these in brackets say Spark. These are Spark tables, Delta tables. And I also see the new table that the trip was the one that we created earlier and the weather one, which I just now ran. So I have all these. I didn't do any fancy linking or anything. All I did was, if you notice over here, I mentioned my data warehouse name dbo.weather from a notebook. Just mention the name, bang, it goes right into my data warehouse. The blob storage, I had the permissions. I created it inside Synapse. All I need to do was just click on the link. I got everything over here. I'm able to visualize. I can do. Imagine if you are doing a real data exploring or something like ETL work, you can run. I'm using PySpark out here. If you want to do SQL, you can do that as well. Meaning, let's say, let me add one more cell out here and say code cell, and then I just want to say star star SQL. Then I quickly switch to this cell will be executed in using SQL scripts. So I can just say select star from raw SQL, this particular the weather dot humidity for that matter. Weather dot humidity. Then I can start playing with this too. Yeah. So I can directly talk to. No, there is no need the necessity that I should only stick to PySpark. I can switch my language as and when I want. So I can do all these, which is pretty cool. Hmm. And next up, what I can also do over here, I can schedule this notebook inside Data Factory again in a click of a button. So okay, so I go here, say add to pipeline, say new pipeline. Automatically, what it does is it creates a new pipeline, a data factory pipeline over here. Change pipeline to, okay. So and then see, validate this guy. So this particular this task is called in Data Factory. This is a task to run notebooks. Automatically, it gets created. It gets linked. If I want to do something more complicated, I can pull in something like a copy task or a data flow. If you are familiar with data flows for moving the data around and so on, so you can do all these stuff, drag and drop, treat it exactly like you do inside ADF. So let's publish this guy, and then we can schedule this as well. I can say if I want to create a schedule to run this, I can do that over here, create a new schedule over here, or I can just run it now. The run now takes few minutes because again it needs to kickstart the the session and so on. Okay, so while that happens, let me quickly go over here and drop this table. So because it tries to create the same thing, the notebook was creating that. So before it gets the session, let me go ahead and drop it off. Okay. Okay. So now the pipeline is running. Let it run. It takes 2 minutes. Let it run. So what we want to do now is, so it will write some data into this weather table. And then what we want to do is we want to see the data out of Power BI. That's the final thing. So in notebooks, I can make change. I can do the ETL. I can explore the data. You have the visualization. You have data flows if you want to. If you are more, if you like that drag and drop and you don't want PySpark. If you are completely into SQL, like many of us are, then you can either use star dot. You can use Spark SQL the way I did, percentage SQL, and play with the data. Or one more thing which I wanted to show was you can also use serverless pool to talk to the delta tables as well. Meaning I can directly query this weather.dbo.humidity is the delta table that we just now created. I can talk to that as well, which is again pretty cool. Meaning all I have is a storage account, and I have created a Spark pool, and I can run our good old SQL queries against it to explore the data and also do some visualizations as well, like we did earlier. So, which is very interesting again. So over here, I'm just using the serverless one, which is cool. Okay, so now I have already exceeded my time. So let me quickly show how you can link it to our favorite tool, Power BI. How many Power BI fans in the room? I think all, isn't it? So I go to manage, click on link services, click here, say new. It says connect to Power BI. Okay, yes, happy to connect. And I need to create a, okay, let's, let me, never mind, or let me pick up. It shows the various workspaces that are there in the same subscription, in this particular subscription. So if I go to, let me go to powerbi.com. Let's quickly create a workspace. Synapse Sql. Okay. Discord. So let me quickly link it to Power BI over here. Say Synapse PBI. Synapse, not it. Have you refreshed, my friend? Yeah. Okay. I see the workspace that was I'm trying to hit. So I have this workspace over here. So created. So now my Power BI is linked with Synapse. So let me click on it to do some more stuff. Let me go back to data. Okay, I need to publish this so that goes. Okay, so let me go over here. Good. Let me say and then over here. Yeah. So under develop, I see Power BI. So can go over here, click on Power BI datasets. After I link, it comes up over here. I click on Power BI datasets. Say new dataset for integrating it. So it says the file. It says download this data file, which links to the data pool that I have. So it is establishing a connection to my data pool. So I should see the table if the job was successful. Yeah, if not, while this comes up, we can also take a look at the job. Please. You can see it over here. So look at, you can go back to monitor over here. Pipeline runs. Yeah, I can see the weather table. So I can see the trip table. I can see the weather table over here. Yeah, the job was also successful. As usual, typical Power BI style, it asks me direct query or whatever, and then I'll be able to publish it onto the workspace. So I have already overrun my time. So So hopefully I was able to demonstrate that we can plug in all these things fairly quickly together, and we can see the data inside Power BI. Yeah. Hope you are getting the gist of it. You have a video recording, so hopefully you can play it back and forth. So to see what are the capabilities are, just to summarize, you have dedicated pools, typical data warehouse. You have serverless, which can do read-only queries, run read-only workload against blob storage. You have Apache Spark pool like Databricks, all very easy to plug in. You have Data Factory, data flows, again very easy to plug in, and then Power BI, you can link it up. Yeah.
Thanks, Nagaraj. Really nice session. Hi, everyone. If you have any questions, so you can unmute yourself and can ask, or maybe you can put the questions in the chat box.
Okay. If let's see, any questions, team? Yeah,
Uh,
Sarah.
Not yet, but I have one question. Maybe
Yes.
it's some already. Okay. Basically, when we means initially when you have created the tables with the script, so means like suppose we have a historical data or we have a data from the live from the IoT or somewhere. So what type of tables we need to create? Means like how exactly? Because as I was going through before, so there are a couple of type of different tables in Synapse Analytics. Like there are round robin, and there is
Okay.
also hash mapping. Yeah. So
Okay. Sure. Uh, that's a question that's pretty focused related to dedicated SQL pools. Okay. So
yeah.
you can have the way you want to replicate the table inside dedicated SQL pools is you have three options: hash match, hash, round robin, and replicated. Each one has a important use case. Okay. Uh, One word answer to you, as of not to disappoint you,
Yeah.
meaning typically you want to, if it is just about an ingestion, it's round robin. If it's a fact table, you would typically go for hash, and if it's a small table, it will be replicated. So it's 10-second answer. But
Yeah.
I have a session coming up on probably on the next round where I will probably show how you can tune some of these workloads inside, specifically inside data pools. So the first session was to give you an overview with with entire Azure Synapse Analytics. Second session, inside data pools, how do you distribute the tables? How do you tune? What are some of the common problems that you would face when you go production? Okay, so just to I'm working on one of the biggest implementations of Synapse in the world. Okay, so one of the huge customers managing lots and lots of hundreds of uh, data factory pipelines,
Yeah.
thousands of tables, massive amount of data, hundreds of several users directly trying to hit lots of applications all into one Synapse workload, which is doing very well. They had their The customer had their issues. We did some lots of fixes. There were quite a few things that we did to tune the database, and then and they are able to do some amazing stuff with the product. So that's something I want to share in the next session. Yeah, hopefully.
Sure. Yeah, because my question was related to more on production side, yeah. So what I mean, like, yeah, okay, sure. Maybe I think next session will
Yep.
go on. Okay.
So
Thanks. I think maybe I'll just share our next session is. Let
yeah,
me share my screen.
and my apologies to Shane for overrunning. So
No, no, that's fine. I
No,
think.
that's fine. That's very fine. It was a very interesting session.